Uh, Good morning, everyone. Want to welcome everybody here to our SDS2 2021 New and Enhanced Connections webinar. Excited to present to you today. We are going to run a quick poll here up at the beginning of this webinar, do things a little bit differently, just to kind of give some people a little extra time to join in the webinar and that so they don't miss anything. So poll that I want to run here is about later this fall. If you are planning or maybe haven't even considered attending the SDS2 summit that we're putting on down there in St. Pete Beach, Florida. I know things are little iffy right now, a lot of unknowns still going on in the world, but just thought it would be a good idea to kind of gauge who's all maybe looking at attending already. So, and like I said, this will give us a chance for some extras who maybe are having trouble logging on and that. So I know I'm looking forward to some warmer weather. Been pretty cold here in Lincoln, Nebraska over the last few weeks. We got a warm spell going on now though, so been kind of nice, but nothing like Florida will be on the beach. So we're gonna go ahead and just give that a minute. Looks like majority of you are undecided, but yeah, we do have a pretty good portion here looking like that are about 20% yeses so far. Most of you are probably undecided, and that's kind of expected here with the state of things, the way things are right now. So give that another minute or two here. See, we still got some votes coming in. Looks like we're slowing down here a little bit now, so. Okay, we'll go ahead and close that poll then. Looks like we got a pretty good gauge there. Can we share the results of that? I think we can share the results of that with everybody just to give you an idea. So yeah, it looks like about 20% planning on coming. Like I said, over half are undecided. So that's a pretty good number there. Gives us a pretty good gauge. So that's interesting information. Thanks everybody for that. We're going to go ahead and just introduce ourselves here. So for those of you who do not know, my name is David Zapka. I'm the Western Territory Manager here with SDS2. So I've been involved in our support department. That's where I got my start, managed that for a little while. I've been involved in kind of directing development for a while and different roles and responsibilities here. So I have with me Colin Kierlieber. Hopefully that's correct. I don't always get that right, but Colin's been our chief engineer here with SDS2 since around 2006. Is that correct, Colin?
Yep, that's right.
Yep, okay, very good. So a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience here with SDS2. Since we're talking connections, you know, I'm good with the software and that. Colin's going to be able to bring a little bit deeper level of kind of that engineering knowledge for us today. So we are going to turn off our webcams for now, just so that we can focus on the presentation and that, and we don't get distracted by that. So webcam's going to go away now that you know who we are. And take a look at our agenda. So first thing we're going to discuss is design code updates. So we're just going to go through a kind of a summary of some of the design code updates that we have. We'll talk about the new flush framed joist connections that you'll be able to design in SDS2. Those are kind of specific to Voltcraft right now, but I believe there's a lot of distribution centers and things like that that are using this type of connection. So it's been a pretty big demand here. Then we have some enhancements to our through shear plate connections. We can do inner flange plates on our column splices now. We'll look at that. A lot more control over the horizontal brace and the gusset clip angles on how those are attached and how they're fabbed in that. And then we'll dive a little bit into our PDF expanded design calculations to give you a little better idea of how to navigate through those and things like that. So our design code updates. So some of these are pretty specific to a lot of seismic connections, and hopefully everybody's signed up for the next webinar this morning that covers the seismic connections specifically. But a lot of these updates had to do with the 3rd edition of the AISC seismic manual coming out. So we did a lot of updates to the moment frame connection design in there. We added some different options and things for your different moment frames, whether it's ordinary, intermediate, or special. We updated the bolted flange plates to meet AISC 358 requirements for the SMF and IMF moments. And then something that was specifically required because of seismic requirements, but has been kind of a general request over the years, is separating flat bar and plate grades in our project settings. So little nugget that's helpful for connection design, but other areas in the software as well. So Colin, is there anything you'd like to add to this particular slide? Anything I might have missed or any important information?
Well, I just wanted to point out with the separation of flat bars and plates, that means your flat or the plate grade will need to exist in the flats if you're going to swap your plate for a flat like you might with a shear tab. I think that's the only extra bit of information I wanted to say in this one. We'll get more into the seismic stuff next session.
Okay, very good. So the next thing we'll move on to then will be our flush frame joist connections. So just a little bit kind of high level on that. If you haven't seen these, or maybe some of you have, so you're familiar with it, but just high level here. So the way these work, the joist, obviously, and then the knife plate that connects to a shear plate in this case is all going to be provided by Volcraft. They, or the EOR, will typically provide in the design drawings the size of the knife plate, hole locations, different things like that. And then the shear plate to attach that to in the field and connect everything up is going to be provided by the fabricator. So typically, you know, then the detailer is going to have to come up with that connection, maybe send it off for approval by the EOR, by Volcraft to do that. So not a ton different than your typical connection design, sending stuff off for EOR as far as the kind of collaboration and how you have to work with other parties goes there. There are going to be some specific project settings that we've added or enhanced to get these needed connections. So some of those are going to be in your joist connection settings. We're going to have to make sure we do our joist manufacturer setup right. We have new field clearances for this, some new bolt settings. And then, of course, you can specify these in your auto standard connections or user defined connections if you need as well. Within your joist edit window, you're going to see a new input connection type in that little drop down there. Of course, then we have the connection component where you can edit that component, lock any of the variables of that connection to get what you need. And then kind of another little bonus here along with this project is we've added the new CJ series joists in there as well, and we'll take a look at all that as we go. Next up then we'd have our through shear plates, and so different things with that. A lot of these are not necessarily brand new to 2021. Some of this we're just going to reiterate, might have been added in 2020, some of these settings, but kind of goes along with the same topic, so we thought we'd reiterate on some of these to hammer that point home, make sure that everybody's aware of some of this stuff. So we have options now to cope through plates. So if you had a dissimilar or different depth shear plate on opposite sides that was being shared, in the past we would always get kind of a bevel cut on that. We have the option to cope those now instead of doing a bevel cut. If we have a plate that's coming in perpendicular to a through plate, we may not always want it welded, so we have an option to not add that weld in the middle there. We can control the edge, how far that through plate projects out past the column. In our beam edit, then we're going to have connection specifications to control whether it's a through plate, whether it gets split, and then if it's welded or not there in the middle. And then, of course, in the connection component edit, we have some additional through plate properties to control there and use the lockables with as well. So anything I need to add now on this one, Colin, before we get to the demo here in a little bit?
No, I think we can cover it during the demo.
Okay. So then our next topic here is going to be the column splice inner flange plates. So as far as getting these in the model, this is pretty simple. It's a matter of a checkbox to set your default in the column splice settings. In our connection specifications, we have control over, whether we want to include that or not. And then our connection component edit, we can control those flange plates as well as any fill plates that might be required. Typically when we see these inner flange plates, the reason for that is we can achieve a higher capacity connection because the bolts are now in double shear versus just a single shear plane then. So that's typically why we would see those inner flange plates. Again, Colin, anything you'd like to add on this one?
The only thing I would add on this one is that if your two column section sizes do require fill plates on the inside of the flange, those will be non-bearing fill plates, so you'll see them set back a little from the end of the column.
Okay, good to know. Horizontal brace gussets, in our member detailing settings, we're going to see different options to weld or bolt the gusset to clip, weld or bolt the clip to the beam, and then options of how I want those attached, shop attached to the beam, shop attached to the gusset, so on and so forth. And then we can also control that through connection specifications on a case-by-case basis. Keep in mind here, in this situation, we are only doing shop welds. We don't support the field welds yet in this case. So if you do pick a combination of those settings that would result in field welds being required, you may see a failed statement. We've added several new failed statements to account for that and give you the information on why we're not doing those yet. So, and then finally, we'll end with the PDF expanded design calculations. So this is one of my favorite things about 2021. It's an improved layout, so much easier to read. I know a lot of you had trouble with the page breaks in the past, so we've fixed those. Those are more well thought out and more predictable. Everything's just more organized. We've used colors and bold, things like that to improve the readability, and then a lot of bookmarks to navigate around and find the information that you're looking for. One of the big things also that was an issue in the past was we were using an HTML format that, depending on the web browser you opened those calcs with, you would have potentially seen some formatting issues, and the formulas and such may not have looked 100% accurate. And that was limitations of your web browsers, whether it have been Mozilla Firefox or Google Chrome or which version of that you were using. With PDF, we can eliminate those issues and have eliminated those issues. So on to the live demonstration here now. Before I do that, call on anything else that I may have missed or you'd like to add here before we get to the demo part of this.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, very good. So I do have SDS2 open here already. I'm going to go ahead and grab that. So first thing I'm going to touch on here is we talked about just some of the general things. I'm going to go into our project settings. And I mentioned that the plate and bar grades have been separated out. So what that means is when I go to my material grades and I were to look at my flat bar grades, in the past you saw a note down here indicating that it was shared with plates. That's gone now because it's not shared. And if I just add something in here that's different than the out of the box, I'm just going off of memory here, so don't crucify me if I have my values wrong in there. I think that's pretty close. So let's say I add that A57260 in here. This was for my flat bar grades. When I come down here to my plate grades, that is no longer included in here because these are completely separate tables, can be used completely separate for plates versus flat bars. But again, like Colin said, there are times in SDS2 where it can match up a plate size with a flat bar. We need to have some crossover there still, or something to be aware of on your guys' end, that it may try to match those up. And if you want those to match up with the appropriate grade, you need to make sure you have those in both then. So.
Yeah, so just to clarify that, so if you had added that A57260 to the plates list, and that's what you happen to be using for your shear tabs, if that grade then did not exist in the flats, then the system would not pick a flat. It would maintain the plate.
Okay, very good. So that's our, excuse me, the plate and flat bar grades we can see have been separated. Next thing on our list then is talking about those flush framed joists. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the shapes properties and show you kind of what that looks like a little bit here. So when I open the shapes properties, I'm probably just going to open my local material file for, excuse me, my local shapes properties for this particular project. And it's going to take a minute to load here, as it typically does. There's a ton of information coming in there. What we're going to notice in here, in the past, you typically had your joist type that you could select. So under my joist, you remember I have the joist type. So we've added now the CJ joist type in here to get that CJ series. If I do a find or CJ, hit the next match, we can see these are included in here. If these are not included in here, you may have to go into this joist properties file and run an import for a file that we do include. And if I am not mistaken, that is in my, let's see, I forget off the top of my head where that is at. Let's see here. There we go. So we have a joist manufacturer's plugin, or excuse me, folder. We go into the Volcraft folder and we would import that joist properties Imperial, and that would populate that material file then with the CJ series joist that we have included so far. Keep in mind, you do need to have the joist manufacturer set up properly in your project settings. So that's under This modeling, joist manufacturers, I do need to have the joist manufacturer set to Volcraft within here. You can also set that manufacturer at the time you create your job. In the new job screen, there's the joist manufacturer option within there as well to get that done. If you don't see the joist manufacturer here, then in our utilities, we have a joist manufacturers manager that we can move the valid manufacturers over to the job manufacturers to get that included in there as well. So moving on then to more project settings related to this in our oops, excuse me here, I hit the wrong button. So in our bolt settings, okay, new things that we've added in here, you're going to notice a CJ joist bolts that we have in here. So we have a 3/4 by default A325N for the CJ joist bolts. You'll also notice we have a flush frame joist connection in here. This one is set to 1 inch as the diameter by default. So that is the preference of Volcraft. So that's what we have set up there. And bolt type as well. We can change that. You know, if you coordinate with Volcraft, it's possible that they may accept a different bolt diameter, but that is their preference currently, is the 1 inch bolts. Then the next thing we have some additional field clearances that have been added. So remember from yesterday's webinar, if I do a search in here, if I just type field clearance, if I don't know where that's at, I can come up with some field clearance keywords. There we go. Within the joist connections, you'll notice you have a knife plate field clearance now. So that's controllable there. Also, if I clear my search here, in our standard fabricator connections under the joist connection settings, I have a full section in here for the flush framed connection. So you have your knife plate thickness, horizontal edge distances, minimum number of rows, top of steel. So we can kind of match that up to the connections in the design drawings that have been provided from us here to get those default options the way that we need those to be. So, okay, hopping into the model then to kind of show this a little bit. I have just a little bay over here, got a bunch of joists in there. First thing you're going to notice is I do have a CJ series joist in here, so we have that. You'll notice in the input connection type that I have that flush framed shear option. When I do have that flush frame shear option selected in the connection specifications, I have all the same specifications as I would if this was just a regular beam shear tab. So we could, you know, add stiffeners on the opposite side of the beam we're framing to, different things like that. One thing I do want to point out here is you'll notice that all these are full depth shear tabs. So when you pick your flush frame joist or flush frame shear connection type, SDS2 is going to set this extend size to both flanges by default. And again, reason for this is it is Volcraft's preference to design that always as a full depth shear tab. So that's what we're defaulting to for that particular connection type. And then also with that, you know, you do have, if I double click on that, that is a component, connection component, just like other connections within SDS2. You have your knife plate settings. So that's, again, that knife plate that'll come from Volcraft. And then we have all the variables for our shear tabs. So if for whatever reason another row of bolts needs to be added in there, we can do so. Add 4 rows. I'm just going to change that one. We get a new 4-row connection. Can save that off as a user-defined connection if I need to, same as I can with any other connection there. So, and then also you do get, we are providing the design calcs with that as well. So if I hit the expanded calc here, that would come out. I would get all the calcs there with that. So, Colin, anything I'm missing on the flush frame joists connections that is important you'd like to add in here?
Just point out that these are occasionally used to columns. So you do have the option to do the bottom cord connection as well. And you'll see some of those controls in the connection specifications.
Okay, very good. So yes, I'm showing a joist to beam framing situation. We can use this in a joist to column situation as well, and it'll still get our bottom cord extended if we need, and the plates and everything at that bottom cord should we need that as well. So very good.
I did want to point out, you showed those, I believe it was 4 fields on joist settings. Those can all be adjusted with lockables.
Okay, yep. So those are all, whoops, if I would click the component, not the joist. So those are all still lockables within here, correct? So yep, just like other connections, you have you have your default setup in the joist connection settings, but then we can control those on a case-by-case basis here. So
that's right.
Very good. So our next topic then is going to be the through shear plate. So I'll go back here to the home screen, come to my project settings, and I'm just going to type in here, I'm going to do a search for through, and we can see we have some different options there for through shear plates that come up as a result. It's all in my shear plate settings. So options in here that are new, this cope dissimilar through plate sides. So that's going to give us a cope versus a slanted through plate or beveled through plate. We have that option to weld the split plate to the through plate, as I discussed. We can control the cope radius and then the through plate projection. So how far past or through the tube that we want that through plate to project. Again, this is something that we can control on the connection component edit. So we have a lockable for that we can override the default setting as well, and we'll see where to get to that here in a minute. So if I hop into modeling, I do have a situation set up for us over here. So I have a few different members here. I'm going to kind of isolate these from the rest of the model. So I'm just going to hide the unselected, and I'm going to make that a solid transparent main so that we can kind of see through it. So you can see, since I have that cope option turned on, we get the cope here on that versus in the past we would see a bevel cut come across here. So we're getting that cope. Our 1/2 inch projected past the tube, that was our default setting. So how far do we project this way? And then you can see we have the through shear plate going through here, our through plate going 90 degrees, or what we call the split plate, is being terminated in the middle, but we didn't have that option turned on to weld it, so there is no weld being added. In the past, previous versions of SDS2, this was really difficult to, I shouldn't say really difficult, it was difficult to achieve exactly the results that I wanted. And the reason it was difficult is because the plates and the way it was determined how to add these was based on your member numbers. So You know, the lowest member numbers, if I'm not mistaken, were typically given the through shear plate. Is that correct, Colin?
Yeah, I believe that's true.
Yep. So in the past, so if I were to just turn on these member numbers here for us, just to kind of explain. So we have 281, 286, 345. In the past, it would have ended up this way based on order of operations that I did it, since the 281 was the lowest. But if I wanted this particular plate running perpendicular here to be a through plate and then these to be split, I would have had to probably re-input the beams or model the whole thing over. So now we don't have to do that. If I want to get this one to go all the way through, I come into my beam edit, and I had to drag it here across because I had it on my second screen for some reason previously. You'll see this through shear plate option in here, and I have no, split, and through. So you see I have it set to split. I'm going to set that to a through plate and say okay. So now you can see that goes through that tube. The other two are split. We don't have to cope that one now because it's not being shared all the way across. Maybe simpler for us there in that case. And then again, no weld going there. So you do have to watch out a little bit. So you do have that option within every beam edit window for that through plate. And if you want to split it or go all the way through, you just have to be careful that you have the right combination. SDS2 does in the background try to resolve that if there's conflicts, but there's always going to be a certain combination that you can potentially get where we might not be able to resolve that, and you could see a failed message. So just be aware it's in every beam edit window, and conflicts can potentially arise based on how you have them set. So we talked about the cope, we talked about welding here. You probably also noticed here in the connection specifications that the weld split plate to through plate is just below the through shear plate option. So I can set that to yes, and we are going to see a weld now in the center of that. So you know, in the middle of the column like that, we're probably going to have a difficult time doing that unless we were to split that column or do different things like that. That's not something SDS2 does today, so just be mindful of that. That, you know, there may be some additional work even though we have that going in there. So depending on the situation, you may or may not want that weld done. By default, we have it turned off. So. And then finally on the through shear plates, if I snap to the surface over here again and zoom in, you know, that is a connection component again that I can edit. I can see all the variables, all the lockables within here. Under my tab clips and copes, I have my through plate properties. So if I scooch this over so we can see the preview, we have that free end. So here's my projection. So if I change that to 1 and hit tab, notice that increases the projection past there since it's shared and coped. That whole thing moves out. It's going to potentially affect the field clearance and setbacks on that beam there. Here's our cope versus clip. So kind of hard to see because it's in a opaque form here, but that changes that to being the old bevel style versus the cope. And then your cope radius, of course, would control our radius here in the cope. So some different variables, different lockables that we have available to us in the through shear plates there. Colin, anything that I've missed here, anything important everybody should know about that I may not have covered there?
Well, I would just add that if all of these happen to be set to through plate, then the system would default to the old behavior where the through plate would be based on member number again, with one exception. If you happen to have one of the through plates was deeper than the other, then that would be the one that would be prioritized, and it would remain a through plate while the others would become split.
Okay, very good. Good to know. Next topic then is going to be the inner flange plates on our column splices. So if I move over here to a little different portion of my building, I already have this set up so we can see the inner flange plates there being added to that column. Again, I may just go ahead and turn those to a solid transparent so we can see a little better. So there are the project settings relevant here. So in standard fabricator connections, under my column splice settings, I just simply have that checkbox to use the inner flange plates. So I've turned that on. That's what I'm getting out here. You'll also note that I have a splice plate set for that connection type. Under my connection specifications, you'll note that I have the control within here to override that on a case-by-case basis also. And as we mentioned, when I double-click on that connection component, we have the inner flange plate lockables to control the sizing of that plate. We also have the fill plate options for the inner flange plates there if necessary as well. So that's what we have for inner flange plates today. Anything important on that one, Colin, we should know about?
No, I don't think I'd add anything to that.
Okay, very good. And then our last portion of the connections themselves we discussed, and you saw on the agenda, was for our horizontal bracing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kind of isolate this joint again. Grab my transparent here so we can see kind of what's going on the transparent. So what we have in this particular case, so we talked about more control over how the clips are attached to the beams, how the clips are attached to the gussets, what's shipped with what. So we see here a combination that we probably couldn't have gotten in the past. So we have a welded clip on both of the beams, both the supporting members. And then we have a gusset that's shop attached to the brace, bolted to those clip angles. So, you know, now in the field, we can just set this down on the clips, bolt it up, and away we go. So this wouldn't have been a combination we could achieve out of the box in the past. If we look at the project settings for that, that is actually under our member detailing settings for the horizontal braces, and we have those options under the clip angle connection of gusset to supporting member. So we have a gusset to clip connection. So how's the gusset plate attached to those clip angles? They're bolted. Beam to clip connection is welded. I have the attached clip set to be attached to the supporting, or the beams in this case, and then attach that gusset plate to the brace in the shop. So again, that's what kind of gives us that combination or that scenario. You again also have control over that within your horizontal brace screen. So under my connection specifications, I can override that with the gusset to beam, gusset to clip, beam to clip, and attach clip to options down here as well. So I can override that on a case-by-case basis. Maybe if those beam to clips I wanted bolted instead, I could go ahead and get a bolted clip there instead of the welded, as we saw. Okay. Finally, then, we'll just take a look at some PDF design calcs. So what that new layout looks like, why that's important, you know, what we've done with that. So I'm just going to run a simple connection here. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. The first thing you'll notice when you run the expanded design calc today is that we get a screen come up to actually save a file. So doing this slightly different than we had in the past. We kind of just created like a temporary hidden file in the past. Now we're going to ask you where you want to save that and output that to. So by default, it's just going to my output folder, and it's going to go ahead and run that calc. So as it does this, again, remember, more layout, better readability, more bookmarking for easier navigation and that around there. It'll go ahead and open with your Windows default PDF viewer editor that you have set up. So you can see mine set up to be run with Bluebeam. And when we get that, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit here. So again, some different formatting, a little bit laid out better formatting, better layout, page breaks. So after this first section, we get a page break before we start the left end information. You're going to notice then when we get down to some of these things where there's important information, you may see some coloring. Down on your expanded calcs, you'll see green if everything's okay. You'll see red if it's not good or hasn't passed that. So you'll notice that information. If I go to my bookmarks, we have a table of contents here. I have my Beam B100 and all sorts of bookmarks. So if I just want to quickly go to, let's expand that a little bit. So if I just want to quickly go to the connection strength, check for the right end, boom, I hit it, there we go. I can expand that even further. If I want to go to the design strengths for that right end, there we go, right there. You'll notice that the right end always starts on a new page. So there will be a page break before or right after the expanded calcs of the left end, and then our right end is going to start itself on a new page. And then I can quickly, boom, go down to the expanded calcs, and each individual expanded calc is bookmarked for me to get to down there as well. So a lot easier to navigate, a lot easier readability, eliminated formatting issues with all of this. So that's all we have here for you today on the new and enhanced connections. If you do have questions, you can go ahead and put those in the questions pane on the GoToWebinar toolbar there. We'll have a look at some of those questions and answer those where we can. We do have some different poll questions that we're interested in as well. So the first one I'm interested in is to do with those flush frame joist connections. So we're gonna launch a poll here asking about how many projects you have done in the last year that require those flush frame joist connections. So kind of get a feel for who's using those to begin with. And I'm going to take a look at some of these questions here also. As that's going, I want to leave that poll up for a minute or two here to give you time to answer that. So looks like, so there's a decent amount. So some of these, so we got a 0 to 5. Some of you have worked on 10+ projects in the last year that require those flush frame joist connections. So that's interesting. So here's a good question on the through shear plates. So do the through shear plates work for beams with greater web thickness differences? So we do handle the different web thicknesses in that case. If I were to come back over here and take a look at my situation that I have set up, you will notice I believe the thicknesses in this particular case, they're not far enough off, but if they were far enough off, you would see a fill plate on one side or the other. You can actually see, I believe, when I changed this so that my through plate goes through there, you'll notice that these other plates are kind of offset a little bit, and that's because of the difference in the web thicknesses. So yes, we are handling that where the web thicknesses differ on the through shear plates. Did we share the poll results with everybody on the projects? So here's kind of our poll results on the flush frame joist connections. So a lot of you aren't seeing those projects at all. Some of you are seeing, 0 to 5. Some are hitting the 5 to 10 or 10 plus mark there. So that's good. If you've got questions on like future development, I'd gladly, my email was shared with you ahead of time. I'd be glad to take those emails and stuff, but we're going to try to focus on the topics at hand here today. So if you have questions on the topic at hand here today, we will answer those. Another poll question I'm curious here to see is what percentage of your projects are delegated connection designs. So this is going to give me a good feel for, who's working on or what percentage of you guys are working on delegated connection design versus who's seeing the connections all designed in the design docs. So there's a question on the shop slot being oversized for the through plate. So if you are, I'm going to assume you're referring to the hole within that through shear plate. Where am I at here? Okay, yeah. So if you're referring, I assume you're going to refer to the slot within the through plate. So I have my through plate set up to be, or my shear plates in general set up to be short slots, but there is you can control the hole types in your shear plate settings. And we do have a couple user slot lengths that can be used and set up to do that. So you should be able to adjust the slots. Now, if you're referring to the slots in the column, Colin may have a little more insight on that. I believe that's, I think that's kind of a hard-coded clearance that we have there now, is it not, Colin?
If memory serves, that is a hard-coded thing. I could just say that we haven't changed that behavior from previous versions. So whatever you're getting in 2020, you'll continue to get in 2021.
Okay, very good. We can go ahead and we're going to share the poll results then for what percentage of you are working on the delegated design projects. So looks like well over a third are seeing probably mostly delegated connection design. Lowe's kind of stepping down there a little bit. Some of you are working on, half fully designed, half delegated. So that's good info there. And then I do have one final poll that I would like to see. So, and this just gives me an idea. So what are you providing with your connections to be reviewed or approved? Are you just providing the old SDS2 short calculations? Are you providing the expanded calculations with all the formulas, or do you never even provide that at all? We will be posting the webinar. Yep, we post all the webinars on YouTube and that, so we can, you'll definitely see those come up. So here's a question about not using flat bar. Can we prevent the SDS2 from recognizing a flat bar, or if we have a plate in modeling, what SDS2 does is it looks to your preferred material sizes, and it looks through that list of all your flat bars that you have in there. If a flat bar size is not in that list, SDS2 will not change or treat the plate in modeling as the flat bar. So that's how you would prevent SDS2 from selecting that flat bar, as you would basically clear that list out so it wouldn't have the chance of matching that up. And if we go ahead and show the poll results for that, so it looks like this is a pretty interesting result. So a third of you, or approximately a third, are still going with the old short calcs. About a third are doing the expanded, and about a third are not providing neither. So if you're not providing either, shoot me an email. I'd be curious to see how you handle that and what you are providing for that documentation. Let's go ahead, and that's the last poll we have. So I'm just going to hop over to my project settings and talk about the preferred material sizes that I was just discussing. So that's under our preferred flat bar sizes. If there isn't a flat bar in this list, SDS2 is not going to match your plate up to, there would be no size, so it wouldn't be able to match it up to anything in here. So that's kind of how you would prevent that from happening, is to clear that list out. So. So let's see. So we're not doing a shear through plate at a brace gusset yet. That's something that still needs some work to be done before we're able to do that. So I see that question several times on here about a through plate at where we're sharing or framing into a beam with a brace and a gusset. Yeah, that's honestly, that particular question right there is a majority of your guys' questions. So a shear through plate for beams with elevation difference. I do believe that we handle that to a certain point, to a certain extent. So if those those beams had a little bit of elevation difference, I believe we would handle that to a certain point. Would that be correct, Colin, or do you know off the top of your head?
Again, that was something that we didn't do any work on.
Okay.
I believe it is handled to some extent, as you mentioned.
Let me just try it out here and see what happens. So we'll go up, say 4 inches and see what happens. That might be a little bit too much for us to handle. So yeah, in that particular case, it is a little bit, but I seem to remember handling this in the past to a certain degree, but I'm kind of going off of memory here, and my memory's getting worse as I get older. Okay, so there's something. So I did a 2-inch difference there, so it is able in that particular case to handle that through plate. But there is probably a threshold in there somewhere where we're not able to, so. Again, if you got questions on future development, please email me here afterwards. I will take your question on future development, but we're trying to stay focused kind of on the topics here at hand today. Rotated columns. So if this column was rotated, we will handle that again to a certain extent if memory serves me. So I do believe there's a a certain threshold here where maybe the slots aren't quite right once we get to a certain point, but oops, my navigation here is a little off. So yeah, we do see here in that rotated column, we got the through plate, we got the slot, same as over here, we're getting that all that going on. So yeah, we do handle those rotated columns there as well. So there's a question here on the angles for the flush frame joist connections. So instead of doing a plate here on these, sometimes we will see an angle in that particular case, something that we don't have done yet, but we're looking into a little bit here. So again, something you might see in future versions to get an angle there instead of the plate. Questions are slowing down a little bit here. So I'm just going to flip over to my PowerPoint, if I can find it again. Let's go here. I may have closed my PowerPoint. Nope, there it is. All right. So, you know, we do have the seismic connection webinar coming up here next at 10:15, I believe it is. Love to see you all in there again. Just want to go and remind everybody to make sure you're all staying informed, keeping up to date. We have put all our content, every webinar we do goes on YouTube shortly after they're done. So if you need a recording, want to see a previous webinar, go to YouTube, our YouTube channel. You can find them there. We post a ton of stuff on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Always check that stuff out. We have a blog on our website to check out. That SDS2 toolbox, I believe, was mentioned a little bit in yesterday's webinars. So that's something on our website that we've done recently here that allows us to provide you guys with a lot more custom components without having to wait on a full SDS2 release, version release to get updated components and new components. If you need updated training, have new people coming on board, anything like that, all our training videos are online. Go through that, get your certification for being SDS2 trained. And then again, I know we ran this poll at the beginning, but would love to see everybody this fall here at St. Pete Beach in Florida at the SDS2 Summit. We are planning on doing that in person this year, so love to see everybody there. And just a big thank you for attending. Again, I would love to get questions from you. If you have additional questions, my email address was shown at the beginning of this, as well as my phone number, I believe. So some of you probably jotted that down. Would love to hear from you. Contact support, contact sales. Any of us would be happy to answer questions for you. And we'll see you at the next webinar. Thank you.